$1 million in Sydney or Melbourne is basically enough money to buy you space for two, a two-bedroom apartment in the inner city, or keys to this, one of the world's fastest two-seater supercars, the Lamborghini Aventador. One is clearly a logical and practical choice, the other is sheer indulgence. With low interest rates and the housing boom in full swing, there is still money to be made out of inner city apartments. On the other hand, there is absolutely nothing that's pragmatic about the Aventador. This particular car starts from $761,500 plus on-road costs, and that's before you go adding the $80,000 worth of options, including the $9,600 reversing camera and parking sensors, or the $20,000 paint job. Does it feel like $1 million car? Well, yes and no. You look around, there are some nice touches indeed, but by the same token, a lot of the switchgear feels familiar because again, it's found in your everyday Audi. One thing that isn't shared with the rest of the Volkswagen group is the Aventador's 6.5 litre V12 engine, a drivetrain that originally spans back in parts to the Lamborghini Countach of the 1970s. Like that car, the Aventador's engine is mid-mounted. It is mated to a single-clutch 7-speed transmission that can accomplish gear shifts in just 50 milliseconds. All-wheel drive traction, a carbon fibre monocoque, pushrod suspension and carbon ceramic brakes complete the performance package. Not that any of those attributes are much help on inner city roads. Now they might be known as the raging bull, but the sad reality is that most Lamborghinis are confined for a lot of their lives to the inner city. And I've got to say, it feels like a caged animal. I mean, sure, all the switchgear and the basic layout feels like an everyday car. There's even stop-start technology on the engine and a street driving mode, but there's nothing that's really civilised about the whole experience. You know that you're in what is essentially a race car for the road. The steering's light enough at low speed, but other than that, there's nothing really civilised about this car. It rides really firm over bumps. And there's a lot of shudder and backing and forthing on that gearbox. It's not a very nice experience at all. It's almost as though the car's screaming at you to get it out of the city and onto some open roads. A lot of people will probably regard the Lamborghini as probably the ultimate poser's car, and we're fortunate enough to get a lot of different machines through the drive office. Nothing really like this. Even driving around some of Sydney's nicer suburbs, you are the centre of attention. Everyone's looking at you. Everyone hears that engine bellowing from a distance and they turn around for a double take. They have to see what it is. It's something you definitely have to get used to in this thing because there's just no hiding it out on the road. With minimal ground clearance and strictly limited outward vision, the Aventador is not an easy car to commute city traffic in. The saving grace is a high-speed suspension mode which raises the nose of the car by 4 centimetres for speed humps and driveways. However, that was yesterday, and today represents a whole new kettle of fish. We're going south of Sydney just to see how it goes out on the open road. Leaving the city, I've still got the front perched right up, just so I avoid all those potential little hazards. It still sits really low. I'm still really worried about scraping out everywhere I go, and I've still got plenty of people looking at me the whole time. A bit more time behind the saddle of this thing gives you, I guess, a bit of an understanding really of its day-to-day ergonomics. And one of the things I've since found since yesterday is that there's no room for anything. There's no cup holders. There's no place to really put a key. The only logical spot really for your phone, your wallet, your keys is your pocket. The other thing that's really been highlighted today, even in that higher speed sort of traffic, is just the lack of vision in this thing. Obviously it's very compromised at the rear, just in that you've got that very narrow rear window. But the other thing I found today is just even the front window. It's very, very narrow, hard to see out of, and it just means that you just have to pay that extra bit of due diligence just to make sure that when you are merging between lanes or when you're coming up to a potential obstacle, that you check that extra time just to make sure that you're safe. Our venture south eventually strikes gold in the form of some quiet open road, where the Aventador's real strengths come to the fore. Now this is more like it. Finally some country open roads to really see how this thing goes. And I've got to tell you, my first impression, totally unbridled performance. 0 to 100 in just 2.9 seconds. and onwards to a top speed of 350 kilometres an hour. It is just mesmerising power. You think you get your head around what a powerful car is, well this has just rewritten all those parameters. It's absolutely head smashing just how fast this thing is. And you know what? Up that tempo a little bit and you finally start to get your head around the gearbox. The really taut suspension, the really stiff and rigid steering, it all makes sense as this thing really comes together. There's no doubt that the Aventador is a car that still requires your full attention. Get anywhere near its red line and you notice the steering wheel is tugging at your hands. It wants to go all over the road. It's a machine that you really just have to hold on to by the scruff of the neck and go toe to toe with it. On an open road, it's probably not as unpleasant as you might think, especially compared to the city. Sure, you've got all that coarse chip road resonating through the cabin and you can feel the rough surfaces sort of nibbling at the steering wheel, but it is a nice open air machine, that's for sure. Being so long, the initial suspicion with the Aventador is that it's going to be a little bit of a handful to hold onto in corners. There's no doubt with all that power, it is a little bit off-putting at first, but that lack of vision, that everything else, it all makes sense because the car really shrinks around you in corners and it's like a go-kart. That's the only thing you can really compare it to. There's no body roll and it really just hugs on through corners. The other reassuring thing about the driveline is the fact you've got all-wheel drive traction. Having those four really thick and wide tyres to channel all that power instills a little bit more confidence knowing that it's not going to pirouette on you unexpectedly. The steering on the Aventador, pretty much in all situations, is probably the one exception to that raw edge stuff. It's light enough around town and well weighted, but it weighs up really nicely through corners when you really lift the tempo a bit. It's all that feedback that really enriches the whole experience with the Aventador. You know you're driving something that is supposed to be a race car, and the steering really bolsters that feeling.
Looking at it rationally, you come away with mixed feelings about the Aventador. That's because there are more rounded road cars available on the market, just as there are better accomplished track cars.
But let's face it, the Aventador represents the end of an era. As most manufacturers move to smaller, more efficient drivetrains, there's something you really have to admire about something pure and unadulterated.
And no amount of money or options is likely to change that.